What's up, Packers fans? Welcome back, and as always, thank you for joining me. My name is Paul Brettel, and if you're tuning in for the first time, hit subscribe while you're here. I do appreciate it. But I'm the site editor over at Dairyland Express, where we cover the Packers, Brewers, Milwaukee Bucks, and your Wisconsin Badgers. I also have 2 articles out each week over at Cheesehead TV on Monday and Friday. So today, we find ourselves in the dullest point, quietest point of the NFL offseason, that time between OTAs ending and training camp and the preseason beginning. So I thought that this would be a great time to reflect on those who are underappreciated. Speaking of underappreciated and some of the articles that I've written, I had one come out on Friday discussing Adrian Amos, one of the more underappreciated players, not just on the Packers, but I think around the league. He's turned into one of the best safeties in football. So head over to Cheesehead TV, check that out. Shameless plug, I know. But today I wanted to talk about the offensive line, who really doesn't get a ton of credit. When they are discussed, oftentimes it's pointing out the mistakes that they made. So I want to discuss them, but I also want to touch on Adam Stenavich, the offensive line coach. If the offensive line doesn't get much credit, the offensive line coach gets even less. And both the offensive line unit, Adam Stenavich, as well as Luke Butkus, the assistant offensive line coach, absolutely need their recognition, especially after the performance that they put on last season as a whole, while overcoming injuries and playing musical chairs along the offensive line. So we all know, we watch the games, obviously. We see the numbers, the stats, all that stuff. This Green Bay Packers offense last season was really good. By Football Outsiders DVOA metric, they were first in football. They averaged the most points per game. They took that leap forward in year 2 of the Matt LaFleur offense that we were hoping for. Rodgers returned to MVP. Aaron Jones was Aaron Jones. Davante Adams was Davante Adams. It was glorious. Now, I know the NFC Championship didn't turn out how we wanted, but overall, it was a really fun season, and they were excellent. However, the offense, while they still would have been good, they do not have the success that they had without the offensive line. The offensive line for the Green Bay Packers was, by many metrics, the best in football last season. And if you're looking at a metric where they weren't the best, I'm going to bet that they were very close to the best. If we look at Pro Football Focus sacks allowed, they were second, as in they gave up the second fewest sacks. By pressures allowed, they gave up the fewest. ESPN's pass block win rate metric, which measures the frequency at which a player can sustain his block for at least 2.5 seconds, the Packers offensive line unit, you guessed it, first. By ESPN's run blocking win rate metric, they were first. You get the idea. Pick a stat. They were really good. And then, as impressive as that was, what's even more impressive is that they were able to sustain that level of play while battling numerous injuries. We all remember David Bakhtiari being out for the playoffs, but he missed some time during the regular season as well. The same goes for Corey Linsley. And then Rick Wagner, who played a key role last season, coming off the bench, starting some games. He was kind of in and out as well, battling a knee injury. And with that, there was shuffling that had to take place. Billy Turner played right tackle, left tackle, and right guard. Elton Jenkins, he played every position except right guard, and he might have even taken a snap there at one point as well. John Runyon Jr., a 6th-round pick, came off the bench, filled in when needed, and I mean, it looks like the Packers really have something in him, a day 3 gem, and someone that can be a crucial part of this offense for years to come. Lucas Patrick, he played both guard spots. He filled in at center when Corey Linsley was out. And then again, Rick Wagner, he started the year on the bench as a backup, but as these injuries came up, he came into play and held his own very well. I have to say, I was nervous about the Rick Wagner signing and him seeing a bulk of snaps at right tackle, but he proved me wrong. Someone else that proved me wrong and deserves a ton of credit, Billy Turner. I actually wrote an article back in January about those two, and about basically the premise of the article was how wrong I was, because I was completely nervous about those two being tackles last season. But for the most part, they were both very rock solid. And so when we see this movement taking place, guys shuffling, playing different positions each week, for the most part, the level of play that the offensive line put out as a collective unit was the same. If you didn't know the names of the players and you just watch the offensive line, I mean, from an overall perspective, week to week, you would probably just assume that it was the same group of guys out there. Because whether it was Jenkins at guard, at center, Turner doing the same, who was at tackle, all that stuff, the offensive line kept playing at an extremely high level. And I have to say, that is so incredibly rare. Most teams, most offensive lines, when that happens, they crumble. They suffer, and understandably so. It's hard enough to put together a top 5 offensive line unit, a starting 5 that can be one of the best in football. But when you're having these injuries and need to move, now that offensive line unit that's one of the best in football, it has to run 7 deep. It has to run 8 deep. That's obviously incredibly hard to do, especially in a salary cap league like the NFL. But the Green Bay Packers, this offensive line unit, they were incredible. And from week to week, didn't matter what popped up for the most part last season, they held their own. Now, admittedly, the NFC Championship game was a problem, but there's times where you just got to tip your hat to the opponent and say, you played a heck of a game and you beat us. Because that Tampa Bay defensive front, they wreak some havoc. They did all year. They did in the NFC Championship game. And then if you watch the Super Bowl as well, they did the same thing against the Kansas City Chiefs. So it's unfortunate. Yes, Billy Turner, Rick Wagner, they did take their lumps in that game, admittedly. I think they each gave up 2 sacks. But collectively, as a whole, with the injuries that they had to overcome as a group last season, the movement that took place, the musical chairs, as I said, it was truly an impressive performance. And of course, we give credit to the players on the field first, because they're the ones out there. They're the ones going snap for snap, putting up the production, keeping the quarterback clean, creating those blocking lanes for Aaron Jones to run through. But with that, Adam Stenavich deserves a ton of credit as well. In a couple of interviews, he's really simplified it. And of course, this is going to be oversimplified. There's a lot more that goes into it. But really, 2 of the big factors that he seems to always come back to is fundamentals, which of course makes sense. It makes so much sense that I think it's something that can be overlooked, but fundamentals are crucial. And just like for Aaron Rodgers and the receivers and Aaron Rodgers and the running backs in year 2 of the Matt LaFleur offense, having a better understanding of what their responsibilities are, where guys are supposed to be, the same thing applies to the offensive line. So having largely the same group intact from 2019, year 1 of the LaFleur offense, to 2020 with year 2. I mean, that was crucial for the offensive line as well. It doesn't get talked about, but that was just like for the skill position players, that's vital to their success as well. So the fundamentals, knowing where they're supposed to be, their responsibilities within the offense, that's huge. And again, simple, but areas that you want to emphasize. The other point that Stenavich often talks about as well is just letting the players be who they are. And I think what we can kind of boil that down to is coaching to your strengths, which is what every coach should do. Put players in positions as much as you can to succeed. Now, obviously, that's not going to happen all the time, but putting them in positions as often as you can to be successful. It's like they say, and I don't know who came up with the saying, but it's like they say when you're talking about the draft. Don't tell me what a player can't do. Tell me what he can do so I can figure out as the coach how he can be successful. And so, though, like I said, those 2 things, when you hear them, you're like, well, duh. But because it is oversimplified, but it really is at the core of their success. And again, that goes back to Stenavich, Luke Butkus, and then Matt LaFleur as well, because obviously he's the decision maker when it comes to putting together the offensive line units and moving players around as the injuries come in. If we go back and listen to interviews, the players, they love having him as a coach. And even more, I guess, credit, if that's the right word to use to give to Stenavich, is the development of Ben Braden, because he is someone who was on the practice squad last year. And while we don't know where he's going to fall, the fact that Stenavich a couple weeks ago said that he sees him as a potential starter at either guard or tackle, that just shows the development. And again, the player should get a majority of the credit, but that does go back to coaching as well. So if Braden does come in, even making the roster, but if he plays some snaps and makes some impact plays a key role at some point this season, I mean, that's just another feather in Stenavich's cap for a guy who's 27, been a practice squad player for 3, 4, 5 years or so, however long he's been in the NFL, and then all of a sudden becoming a starter or someone that you can rely on off of the bench. I mean, that's huge. You don't see that kind of development from a player this late in their career. And speaking of the offensive line unit, as good as it was last year, I'm not going to sit here and predict that they're going to be the top unit in the league again in 2021, but they should be pretty good once again. They still have Elton Jenkins. David Bakhtiari is going to be back. Billy Turner is here. Josh Myers, while we don't know who he is yet as a player. By all accounts, he's someone that they absolutely feel can be another Corey Linsley. Whether he becomes an all-pro, we'll wait and see. But even if he can provide just that stability, that reliability at the center position, that's absolutely huge. And then to fill that last spot, you have a veteran like Lucas Patrick, but you also have some young players as well. Ben Braden, who I already mentioned, John Runyon Jr., Royce Newman, who has taken snaps at left guard, and right tackle with the ones during OTAs. I mean, they have so many options, and all of these guys are incredibly versatile. Van Lanen and Newman can play both in and out. Braden can play both in and out. Lucas Patrick can play both guards. He can play center. Josh Myers can play center and guard. We all know what Elton Jenkins can do. Billy Turner can play both tackle positions, both guard positions. This offensive line unit is just incredibly versatile across the board, and they're well equipped as you can be to handle any potential injuries because they have so many options. And so that as we look ahead to the future years, again, because there are so many young players, there's some projecting here on my part, but based on what we know at this point, which again, admittedly, it's a bit small because of sample size, but they look really set up well for the coming years. If we look at this offensive line now, there is the possibility that Billy Turner's gone next year. 2022 is the final year of his deal. Green Bay can save a little over $4 million if they do move on from him. Lucas Patrick, he's in the final year of his deal as well, so he's potentially someone who won't be around beyond 2021. But even with that, this group looks to be set up well. David Bakhtiari, they have him locked down for 4 years. Elton Jenkins, he still has 2 years left on his rookie deal, and then he's going to get a big payday. Josh Myers, hopefully he becomes the center of the future. And then, I'm going to go back to Elton Jenkins here. I think he's going to be the right tackle moving forward. I think that's their plan with him. Then you have Josh Myers at the center. And then at guard, you have John Runyon Jr., who flashed quite a bit in his small sample size. Royce Newman, Cole Van Lanen. They just have a number of options. And the beauty of all that, every guy listed there except for David Bakhtiari is currently on their rookie deal. So they could potentially have a top offensive line unit in the game and really have very little money overall invested into it, which is what every NFL team wants. You want to find as many starters and as many high-quality starters, obviously, as you can that are on their rookie deals, because then that allows you to really build around that core. And the Packers, with the group that they have, the trajectory, you can absolutely see how they can continue to play at a high level, even though a Lucas Patrick might leave, a Billy Turner might leave, because Goody's invested 6 draft picks on that position or on that unit in the last 2 drafts. They're doing what they can to keep it together, and it makes perfect sense. I know we hear so much garbage about, the lack of weapons that Aaron Rodgers has, which to begin with is just not true. But putting together an offensive line, I know it's not sexy, not a sexy pick come draft time to take that second round center from Ohio State or that second round center guard Elton Jenkins from Mississippi State. But you know what? You need it. The game of football has changed so much over the years. But one thing at its core, from the time it began through today, remains true. You must win in the trenches. Again, go to the NFC Championship game. Go look at the Super Bowl. The Bucs dominated the trenches. They won those games. It's crucial to the team's success. And the Green Bay Packers, with Adam Stenavich's help, of course, have built one of, if not the best offensive line unit in football. They should be very good once again in 2021 and 2022 and beyond. Again, some guesswork here. We got to see how it all plays out. I can't stress that enough. But they look to be a unit that can continue to have a high level of success moving forward. So that's what I wanted to discuss today. I just wanted to touch on the offensive line because they were so good last year, and really they were that good while battling injuries, which is truly remarkable. And that, of course, goes back to the players, but also Adam Stenavich and just absolute fine work that he's done as an offensive line coach. I know it was tough to see James Campen go a few years ago when Matt LaFleur came in, but hiring Stenavich was a home run. He knocked that one out of the park, as he did with a number of the other coaches that he's hired. So we got to show some love to the big fellas, and we got to show some love to the man behind the big fellas in Adam Stenavich. So thank you for joining me, friends. You can find me over at Dairyland Express as well as Cheesehead TV. My Twitter is Paul_Bretl. That's BRETL. I'll be back with another video once we got something new to talk about. Shouldn't be too long. I'm pumping out a ton of content. And until then, take care, stay safe, and go Pack Go.